that just about everybody has had many incarnations in other systems. And these other systems are not only physical, there are many, many non-physical dimensions and places to go. There are apparently entire dimensions that are devoted to experiencing emotion. There are dimensions devoted to experiencing color or sound. Everything you can think of is out there somewhere, and many, many things that you can't think of. It's an infinite universe.
Welcome in. I'm Kimberly. I'm so glad you're here today. The guest we have is someone I've had a fan crush on for, I think, almost 15 years now. So I'm really excited for you to listen to this interview. But before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And if you're interested in finding out what's really going on in the world, but you feel overwhelmed, you might want to sign up for our Friday morning email newsletter. The link is in the description box down below. Every Friday morning, we send out a very short, very sweet, very informative email newsletter that highlights kind of the important things that we think are happening on the planet and in relation to the ascension of humanity. It's super easy to sign up. You just fill out the little box. We send it to your inbox. It's super free. It's super fun. I think you're going to love it. We're going to hop into our guest now, and I'll tell you, I am so tickled to be talking with this gentleman. I have been a fan of his for almost 15 years. I read his initial book, Your Soul's Plan, way back, gosh, I think it was 2009. And if anyone had told me that I would be interviewing him at that time, it would have been like, oh, you're crazy. But here we have today, Rob Schwartz. Rob, welcome in.
Thank you, Kimberly. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to be talking with you. What I want to start with, because I think a lot of people don't understand what you do, if you could tell us a little bit about how you work with your clients, and then we'll kind of back up and find out how you got started in this.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm a hypnotist, and I specialize in a very unusual form of hypnosis called a Between Lives Soul Regression, or BLSR for short. And we can talk in detail about what that is as we go along. But basically what happens, it's a long session, 2 hours usually, and you end up in front of what is called your council of elders. And everybody has their own council. These are the very wise, loving, highly evolved beings who oversee your personal evolution. So they know literally everything about you. And when people get in front of their council, I prompt them to ask a long series of questions that covers all the major areas of their life. If they're doing the regression as a private session, they've put all their questions for the council in an intake form so they don't have to remember them, and I work from the form. But we also do the BLSR as a group in online workshops. In that case, I use a standard set of questions for everybody in the workshop. It's quite comprehensive, covers all the major areas of everybody's life. And even though they're all being prompted to ask their council the same question, they receive individualized responses. So the focus is, what did you plan for this lifetime before you were born? Why did you make those plans? How are you doing in terms of fulfilling your plans? And how can you better fulfill your plans? That's the gist of it.
Oh, that's really exciting. And I have read a lot of information about what you do. It's such a fascinating journey to be able to really understand, because I think a lot of people are casting around saying, I don't know what I'm doing here on the planet. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. So it definitely is eye-opening for that. What I want to do is break down what happens during one of those sessions. So can you tell us, be a little bit descriptive about who the Council of Elders is, how they come to be in your particular life? Does everyone have a different council, and what their assigned task is for you during your lifetime?
So what I've seen in my work is that everybody does have a different council, but there is a little bit of overlap sometimes. For example, Jesus may be is a member of a number of different people's councils, as are other, what we would call ascended masters. So the council is unconditionally loving and completely non-judgmental. A comment that many people will make after their BLSR is something like, I could tell that my counsel knew literally everything about me, including all the bad things I've done in this lifetime, but they loved me unconditionally anyway. And they really feel that unconditional love radiating from the counsel when they're in front of them. So, that is really a homecoming of sorts. For many people, it's the first time since coming into body that they feel true unconditional love. And it's really a deeply, deeply healing experience.
Yeah. This is a very tough reality system, Earth is. In your experience, are most of the incarnations of the people who come to you on Earth, or are there journeys into other reality systems in between or peppered in there? What's kind of the ratio of incarnations on Earth and other choices for reality systems?
That's a very interesting and unusual question. I don't know that I've ever been asked the ratio before, and I actually don't know the ratio. I'm very much focused on earthly incarnations, and in particular, why we plan challenges and finding pragmatic solutions to those challenges. So I don't know the ratio, but what I do see, the BLSR is really an old soul activity. It's old souls who are drawn to do this kind of work. A
Yeah.
young soul most likely would actually never even hear about me or the work I'm doing. Or if they did somehow hear about it, they would have a reaction like, well, that's just ridiculous. And they would quickly go on to something else. So I'm working almost exclusively with older souls. My understanding is that just about everybody has had many incarnations in other systems. And these other systems are not only physical, there are many, many non-physical dimensions and places to go. There are apparently entire dimensions that are devoted to experiencing emotion. There are dimensions devoted to experiencing color or sound. Everything you can think of is out there somewhere, and many, many things that you can't think of. It's an infinite universe.
Yeah. That brings up a really question for me. We hear continually, at least in the spiritual community, that Earth is a tough reality system. This is the MMA of
Yeah,
incarnations.
it is.
Why? Why is this necessary? Why do we think it's a good idea? There seems to be a perverse difference between what sounds good to us when we're not in physical, and then when we get into physical, we're like, are you kidding me? I don't want to
Yeah,
do this.
yeah.
And yet, the minute we cycle out, I would imagine, and I know for myself, the minute I transition out of my body, I know I'm going to say, wow, that was fun. I learned so much. Maybe I'll do it again. Well, while I'm here in the body, I'm like, oh, this is so hard. Why did I agree to do that? So, can you speak to the difficulties of the Earth reality system and why we choose to do such a tough gig?
Yeah, Earth is a difficult system because we're in a state of separation here, by which I mean that the average person very much perceives themselves as a separate being, separate from all other people, separate from God, separate from spirit guides, angels, masters, separate from every other living form. That experience of separation is an illusion. As you probably know, there's actually only one being in existence in the entire universe, and that's you, me, everybody who's watching this. We're all individualized expressions of the one. But when you come into body, you confine, most people confine their perceptions to input coming through the five senses. The five senses pick up only a very, very narrow sliver of what's actually out there. Now, people don't think of humans in those terms, but if I say to you, for example, the dogs can hear many sounds that people can't hear, we readily accept that. Well, it's the same with people. We're only picking up this very narrow slice of what's out there, and that's by design. We wanted to focus our attention on the physical, on the earth school, because it makes it more intense, and then we can learn lessons through the experience of the intensity. I don't know that I would say that the Earth School is a necessary experience. There are many beings, as I understand it, who don't choose to come into form. So here we come to a paradox. I've been told many, many times by many non-physical beings that coming into the Earth School accelerates your evolution. The paradox is that in the non-physical realm, there's no time. So why would a non-physical being who's not in time be concerned about accelerating their evolution? I myself don't understand that. I'm not sure I will understand that while I'm still in a body using a physical brain, but that's what I've been told over and over again.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept because I think about that a lot. And the analogy I make is I could spend all day trying to teach my cat how to use my computer. It's just not going to work.
Right.
And there are questions that I struggle with about the nature of our reality system that I don't feel like in this physical form I have on board what's needed in order to understand that. That's kind of a frustrating thing, but I know the minute we cycle out, all those questions will be answered. So that's
Right.
nice.
That's right.
Now, I don't think that you grew up thinking, I want to be a regression therapist.
No.
That would be my guess. So what were you doing before you started this very unusual but much valued career? And how did you get involved in this area of spirituality?
Well, believe it or not, I was in the corporate world for a number of years, doing corporate writing, marketing, communications, as a self-employed consultant. I've always wanted to write, but I didn't know exactly what to write. And so I just sort of bumbled and stumbled my way into that role, which I did not enjoy at all. Corporate work was deeply unfulfilling. And perhaps more to the point, I had this nagging sense for years that I wasn't doing what I came to Earth to do. I knew that, but I didn't know what it was I came to do. I didn't know how to figure out what it was I came to do. So I was lost for many years. And then in 2003, everything changed. I was 40 in 2003, and I believe that I planned to have an awakening at the age of 40, which is quite numerologically significant. So three things happened within a short time of each other. The first was, in order to resolve this existential crisis that I was in, I went to see a psychic medium, almost out of desperation. I wasn't even sure that I believed in mediumship. I come from a very conventional mainstream background, but I was desperate. And so I went to see this medium. And the first thing she said to me was, your spirit guides are here. I said, what is a spirit guide? So that tells you where I was at that time in my life. So she explained that. And then she said, your guides would like to speak directly with you. And she started to channel them. The first thing they said right out of the box was, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I just shook my head and I said, well, why in the world would I do something like that? They said, you did this for purposes of spiritual growth. Then it got really interesting because they launched into this lengthy monologue in which they went through my challenges one by one and told me why I had planned them. The reason this was very compelling is that I hadn't told the medium anything about myself prior to the session, nor did I tell the guides anything during the session. So they knew literally everything about me without me saying a word. Well, that blew my mind wide open. And in the days and weeks after the session, I thought about this perspective constantly. And what it did for me really was that it created quite a deep healing because it allowed me for the first time to see deeper meaning to my most challenging experiences. And then I thought, well, if it can create this kind of healing for me, surely it can do the same for others. That was when I started to think about writing Your Soul's Plan. Now, within a very short time of the session with the medium, two other very significant things happened. One was I was introduced to a woman who can go into trance and channel her soul. So I had the extraordinary opportunity to spend about 15 hours talking to her soul about pre-birth planning. And this huge volume of information came forward that really served as the foundation for the work I went on to do. And then the most significant thing of all, just a few weeks after the session with the medium, I was walking down the sidewalk in the middle of a weekday afternoon, just taking a break from work. And I had this experience in which all of a sudden, every time I saw another person, this feeling of pure, overwhelming, unconditional love for that person washed over me. It was not a human kind of love. It was not personal in any way. I can call it divine or transcendent. All I can tell you is that the purest, strongest, most overwhelming love I've ever felt for whoever I was looking at washed over me. This experience lasted only about an hour, but it changed everything. It changed my understanding of who and what I am, who and what everybody else is. And I was caused to know, as this was happening, that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love. I got that message loud and clear. What I didn't know was why this was happening at that time. That became clear a couple of years later. By that time, I had looked at a lot of pre-birth plans for my first book. And what I found was that every plan was based on unconditional love for every soul involved. And then I thought, aha, that experience walking down the sidewalk a couple of years ago, that was gifted to me so that when I found this result in my research, I would be certain that what I was finding was truth. But the combination of those three things, the session with the medium, the woman's channeling of her higher self, and this experience of divine love for every person, the combination got me to say, okay, I'll leave the corporate world and I'll try to write a book about how we plan our lives before we're born.
Yeah. Can you walk us through an example of a life plan? And the reason I think this is important, particularly right now on the planet, is I'll come across someone that says, "Oh, had the wrong parents," or, "I don't like this planet. I want another one." And I'm thinking the whole time, you chose it. You chose
Right,
it. You
right.
chose it. Can you walk us through how we plan our lives prior to incarnation, all the help that we get, how we make those choices, and what really happens prior to us zooming in and incarnating into that body?
So let's take one of the stories from Your Soul's Plan just to make it concrete. There's a chapter in that book about the pre-birth planning of accidents. And one of the two stories in that chapter is about a woman named Christina, who now I believe is in her 60s. And when I spoke with her for the book, she told me about the following true story that started when she was in her 20s. At that age, she was employed as an administrative assistant at a college in California. And one of her daily duties was to pick up her boss's mail. The mailboxes were in the basement of the building in which Christina worked. So one day, just as she had done many, many times before, she descended those stairs to the basement mailboxes. Well, on that day, unbeknownst to her, somebody had planted a pipe bomb in her boss's mailbox. When she inserted her hand to retrieve the mail, the bomb detonated. The force from this explosion was so great, it actually picked her up off the ground and threw her 10 feet backwards against a concrete wall. There were 6-foot splinters of wood that were shot like arrows out of a bow into the wall around her. 2 fingers were severed, both eardrums were ruptured. Flames from the explosion scorched her body from head to toe. When she got to the hospital, doctors actually had to hold magnets over her eyeballs to extract the shrapnel from the pipe. So yeah, we're talking here about a level of suffering that's almost unimaginable to the average person. Now, her recovery took 2 years and 10 reconstructive surgeries. At one point during that 2-year period, she was lying in her hospital bed in a lot of pain when she suddenly heard a voice inside her head, a voice that was not her own. It turns out that the explosion had opened up her psychic gifts and she had become clairaudient. She was hearing her spirit guide for the first time. Her guide said to her, "You planned this." And of course, she said, "Why?" And then the guide told her, and here's what he said. He said, "You wanted before you were born to have an incarnation as a gifted healer. And you knew pre-birth that if you could heal yourself from this bomb explosion, you could then take all of that wisdom and knowledge about healing and turn it outward in service to others." Well, that's exactly what she went on to do. After she recovered from the 10 reconstructive surgeries, she went back to school, got a PhD in speech language pathology, and set up a private practice. She's now healed literally thousands of people. She developed the ability to go into a client's brain energetically and restore language processing capability in people who lost that due to stroke or accident. So a very gifted healer. And she can only do this because she healed herself first from the bomb explosion. Now, when I spoke with her for Your Soul's Plan, she said 2 extraordinary things to me. The first was, she said, "Rob, I have completely forgiven the person who planted that bomb." Now, remember, this is somebody who had magnets held above her eyeballs in the hospital. And the second thing she said was, "Rob, I am deeply grateful to the person who planted that bomb. And she really and truly means that. This, to me, is one of the most amazing stories I've seen that shows what you can do with an awareness of your pre-birth plan. You know, you can easily imagine she could have chosen to be bitter, angry, resentful for the rest of her life. She might even have chosen to spend the rest of her life trying to track down the bomber and take revenge. But because she came into this awareness of her pre-birth plan and really worked with it over a period of years, she got to a place of forgiveness and to a place of gratitude. And that was part of the plan. She wanted to experience herself as a gifted healer, and she did. She wanted to be of service to others. And this bomb explosion gave her the motivation and the ability to do that. She wanted to deepen in forgiveness and gratitude, and it gave her the opportunity and the motivation to do that. And that's a lot of what pre-birth planning is about, especially in regard to challenges. We view them as providing the opportunity and the motivation to do things like cultivate virtues like forgiveness and gratitude.
What incredible spiritual growth that she has gone through. And what a beautiful lesson, journey, story for the rest of us to understand how we plan these incidences and then we move through them. Can you talk to us a little bit about how a session goes with you? Like, is this in person? Is this online? Does it make a difference? What's the process like? What questions do you ask? Just kind of walk us through a session that you do.
Well, it depends whether it's a private session or one of the group workshops. Both are done entirely online, or in the case of a private session, by phone or Skype. If it's a private session, we'll talk briefly at the beginning of the session about the client's intentions, and then I'll say a prayer and then lead them through the regression. The regression starts with some steps to help people relax physically and mentally. And then I take them into a past life. It's almost always a past life that had a big impact on the plans for the current lifetime. If they're doing it as a private session, they can experience almost any number of scenes in the past life. If we're doing it together in a workshop as a group, they'll experience 4 different scenes. In either case, the last scene will be the death scene in the past life. They'll leave the body in the death scene and cross back over to the other side, which I realize might sound a little bit ominous, but there's actually nothing to it. It's very safe and easy and gentle. When you get back to the other side, most people are greeted by a spirit guide. The guide will tell you what's important to know about the past life, and then the guide will take you to your council of elders. And then again, once you get to the council, if it's a private session, I'm using the questions you put in the intake form. If it's a group workshop online, we go through a standard set of questions, but people receive individualized responses.
Wow, it's incredible what you do. How did you get your training?
I trained with Linda Bachman at the Raven Heart Institute in Colorado. She's a very good instructor. I get a lot of requests to teach people how to do this work, and I've just never felt called to do that, so I always send them to Linda.
And I'm sure you're familiar with Dolores Cannon.
Oh, sure.
She's probably, interestingly enough, I found you before I found Dolores. And of course, Dolores did a lot of past life regression work that led to a lot of awakenings across the planet. How is what you do different than a past life regressionist?
Well, I used to offer standalone past life regressions. I don't do that anymore because I feel like my mission is really the Between Lives work. When you do a past life regression as a standalone session, you're spending all the time in the past life. So you can go into much greater breadth and depth. You can get more detailed information. The past life portion of the Between Lives Soul Regression is relatively short. It's about 20 minutes usually out of a 2-hour session. That's because the focus is on talking to the council and getting their answers to your questions. It's still important. It still provides very valuable, helpful information. It's just a difference in focus, really.
Yeah. Over the course of your practice, did you write the book in addition to starting your practice, or did your practice come later?
No, the practice came later, and it's interesting how this happened. After Your Soul's Plan came out in 2007, almost immediately, I started getting emails from people all over the world, and almost all of them said the same thing. They said, I want you to tell me what my pre-birth plan is. And I wrote for years. I wrote back and I said exactly the same thing to each person who said that. I said, I don't know what your pre-birth plan is. If you want to know that, work with one of the mediums or channels who's in my book or another one of your choice. And then I learned about the work of Michael Newton, who pioneered Between Lives Regressions, which led me to Linda, and then I trained with her. And that has really turned out to be a beautiful blessing in my life, because now it gives me a way to facilitate a process in which the client can retrieve the answers to their questions directly on their own.
Yeah, very valuable, I'm sure. So over the course of your practice, what I'm curious about is that we are heading into a really interesting time on the planet, and of course have been for the last few decades. It's really becoming apparent right now. Have you seen a shift in the plans as a result of what's going on the planet? In other words, has the direction of humanity in that planning stage shifted over the last decade?
You know, when I work with people in private sessions or even in the online workshops as a group, we're looking at the planning for the upcoming lifetime, the planning that was done before they came into body. So I'm not really pulling in information about changes in the last 10 years. Now, having said that, a lot of times that kind of information will come through from a channeled source, a spirit guide, an angel, a master. And I should mention here that my wife is a channel. She channels a group consciousness, a collective that we call the Beings of Light. And they've shared a lot of information with us about what they see going on recently. So just to condense what all these beings have said, Earth is going through an ascension process. Ascension meaning literally ascending, literally rising in vibration. We've already moved, as I understand it, from the third dimension or third density into fourth, and we're headed to fifth, which is a vibration of oneness consciousness and unconditional love. So basically, we're going home while staying in a physical body. That's the miracle of an ascension lifetime. Now, the challenge with it is that we've got all these lower vibrational aspects of our consciousness, programming, false beliefs, trauma. The average person is carrying a lot of trauma. All of these lower vibrational aspects of consciousness can't go with us into fifth density. They're too low in vibration. So they have to be cleared or healed or released. So how do we do that? Well, the ascension is caused by light direct from source flooding the planet. And the light has the effect of bringing to the surface, bringing to conscious awareness, everything unlike itself, everything of a lower vibration. This is happening collectively to the whole human race, which is why you see more craziness than ever in the news. It's also happening individually in each person's life, whether they know it or not. So basically what's going to happen in your life, if it hasn't happened already, your stuff, so to speak, is going to come to the surface. And this is going to be, for the average person, difficult and challenging. The question then becomes, what do you do with it when you become aware of it? Well, becoming aware of it is the first step and the most important step. There's something about becoming consciously aware of a lower vibrational aspect of your consciousness that now frees it up to move. The fact that you recognize it frees it up energetically to release. So conscious awareness is the first step. The second step is to choose not to suppress it. A lot of people go into suppression because they don't like whatever it is they're seeing. It feels bad. They just don't want to deal with it. They stuff it back down. That's never a good idea in any incarnation, but it really will not work in an ascension lifetime. It's going to come back up. So you may as well deal with it the first time you see it. After becoming consciously aware of it, the next step is to thank it sincerely, if you can, for whatever lessons it's taught you, then bless it, and then just set an intention to release it to the universe. That's really all that's involved in clearing. The mind likes to make it complicated. It's not complicated, it's really simple, but it requires courage to look at and feel whatever it is that's coming up.
So is it your position, and it probably would be clearly, that all the souls that are on the planet right now were very clear and very aware of this transition prior to incarnation?
Oh, absolutely. And it's also my understanding that, it's such a unique gift, such a blessing to be in a body in an ascension lifetime. I've been told that there were actually approximately three times as many souls as available bodies for the ascension. So in order to be here in a body on planet Earth now, you had to make a 1-to-3 cut. And the way that choice was made is that you had to have something specific to offer Gaia and humanity in the ascension process. This is a vitally important point for everybody to understand, because so many people in our world see themselves as, or they feel small, weak, powerless, helpless, insignificant. And actually, nothing could be further from the truth. You made a 1-to-3 cut to be here, and you were chosen because you have something to offer the ascension. Maybe you know what that is. Maybe you're in the process of finding out. Either way, you were chosen to be here, and that choice was made for very, very good reason.
Yeah, that's so funny that if you're here, I've heard it's the e-ticket ride. This is a pretty big deal to be on the planet at this time.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned earlier that we're getting more energy from source. Is it because where the Earth is moving in the solar system that we're kind of moving out of the Kali Yuga into a new, I don't know, what is age of Aquarius, that we're getting more direct sun from source? Do you feel like that's why? Or is it just that Gaia has decided, I've done the 3D thing, I want to move up to 5D and see what that experience is like?
I think both of those things are true. I think it's more than just a decision on Gaia's part. As I understand it, she came to feel that she couldn't really take the abuse that humanity was heaping upon her, and she actually called out to Source for help. So the ascension, in part, is a direct response to Gaia's plea for help. It also has to do with the Kali Yuga. I don't know too much about astrology, but I believe that it's a very valid phenomenon, and that we are shifting from an age of darkness into an age of love. I think we're moving from an age of reason into the age of the heart. All these things are happening. They're just different ways of saying the same thing, really.
Yeah. So Dolores Cannon's work, and if you're not familiar with Dolores Cannon, she has a ton of videos on YouTube. She has transition, but there's an archive of her work. She talked, Rob, about waves of volunteers, that Gaia put out a call to work with her to come and help her with this ascension process. Is this something that you've seen or observed in your work?
My understanding is that that is correct. It has not been expressed to me in terms of waves of volunteers. And I know that she numbered them. There's this number wave, that number wave.
Mhm.
It hasn't been put to me in those terms, but it's my understanding that is what is happening. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about the ascension of humanity and the fact that we're all waking up a little bit every day. And I know that there are people that are walking into the kitchen now and, there's Aunt Betty. Only Aunt Betty died 10 years ago. So why am I seeing her in the kitchen? So we're all experiencing a waking up of the senses. And I know for me that my telepathy at times can be off the charts, so much more acute than what I've experienced in the past. In addition, when I look back at my belief system, my my senses, my spiritual senses, connected senses, my clairs, it almost seems like it was caveman like 20 years ago compared to what it is now. Is this something that you're seeing in your practice? Or are you seeing it in yourself? Is your wife seeing it in her practice? How is that showing up for you in your world?
I haven't had too many clients talk about that, but I very much see it in my own life and in my wife's life. My wife has only been channeling for about 3 years now, and it happened quite unexpectedly and quite abruptly. And in my own life, it's hard to put into words, but they just feel that the energy is completely different, and that there have been major changes in my own consciousness. For me, it feels like there's been an emptying, and now there's a lot more spaciousness. And so that raises the question, well, what was emptied? I think a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, basically objects of consciousness, thoughts, feelings, sensations, A lot of these have emptied, they've left, I let go of them, and there's just more space for light to come in. You can think of it in a way as like packing for a big trip. If you were going on a really long trip, you would be very selective about what you took with you because you don't want to lug it around for a long period of time. And you're going to be more inclined to leave behind things that are really heavy. Well, that's sort of what the Ascension trip is like. It's a long journey spanning a number of years. And the lower vibrational aspects of consciousness, the ones that are really heavy, you don't want to be lugging them around all those years. So I feel as though I've let go of a number of those. I don't quite understand how it happened. I don't know that I can necessarily even take credit for it, other than that I've been open to allowing it to happen. And that's a really important point, too. You don't have to figure out intellectually what Ascension is all about and then make it happen. We're taught so much in our society, make it happen, do it, do it. It's more about being, allowing, accepting, being still, and just making yourself open to and available to the incoming energies.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. We're human, and we're in this paradigm, this story, this narrative on this planet that we have to work very, very hard in order to get a result that we're looking for, which is different than what reality is. So we go in, sometimes I see us going in thinking that we have to get in there and do, hard elbow grease work to transition or to grow spiritually, and it's really not. We have a team on the other side, our own personal spirit guides and our allies that are there waiting to help. And all of us has probably experienced some type of information that comes in at just the perfect time. Well, that's perfect timing for a reason. Can you talk about what you've learned about just the average person, how they can work with their spirit guides to really make this process a little smoother?
I think meditation is vitally important for a large number of reasons, but one would be working with your guides. You can hear them more clearly when your mind is relatively quiet and still. And that's what meditation will do for you. If you do just a little bit every day or almost every day, that quietness just grows and grows and grows. And it's not so much that you're going to hear your guides talking to you. You might become clairaudient, but I think for most people, that isn't what happens. It just comes in intuitively. It comes as a knowing, or sometimes the guidance is something as simple and easy to overlook as interest. We could ask the question, where does interest come from? Why is somebody interested in one thing but not another? I would suggest that your interest is your guidance.
And that's so true. Those things, there's this little, it's sort of pablum in our society, but, follow your bliss, seek your joy. Well, there's a purpose behind that, because that which you are interested in is what you're supposed to be doing. And I can attest to that because I hopped on the whole NDE's past life, this 15, 20 years ago, not understanding why I was so fascinated with it. And I just couldn't stop with the stories and the books and this and that. Well, lo and behold, it all comes together at some point. And I imagine the same for you when you were casting around, when you were working in the corporate world, feeling like this just is not satisfying. It's not fulfilling. I feel like I should be doing something different. Are you feeling in alignment now with what you're doing?
Oh, very, very much so. And ever since I started on this path, it feels totally in alignment. It's very joyful. It's very fulfilling. And, people write to me and they talk about the difference that a book made in their life or the difference that a regression made. And I save every one of those emails. I'm actually very sentimental. And someday in my retirement, I'm sure that I'll read them all again. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to touch on what you were talking about with meditation as well. My experience is that meditation really is the gateway to connecting. And from my experience, and you can share your own, it seems like meditation is that space is where I grow that connection. So that my connection is much stronger even when I'm not in meditation. It's almost like building a muscle. It's like you build the muscle in the gym, but you still have that muscle when you leave the gym. You build the muscle in meditation, or that connection in meditation. Most of my wild spiritual experiences happen outside of meditation, I believe, because I have that connection, or I built that connection. Has it been the same for you, or is it a little different from your
No,
experience?
it's very much the same. And I think the exercise or the workout metaphor is a good way to look at it, because if your goal were to build physical muscle through exercise, you wouldn't go to the gym once a month and think, well, this is going to do it. You know, consistency, repetition would be very important. You want to go to the gym 3, 4 times a week, at least, something like that. And it's the same with meditation. The more you do it, as you put it, that muscle builds. For those who want a more scientific explanation, it's my understanding that when you meditate, it allows your higher self to build more, we could call them filaments of light to you, the incarnate personality. So that exercise, that repetition, it's building filaments of light.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
So filaments of light of sorts.
A divine light, the divine light
Yeah.
that constitutes everything in existence.
Yeah, and I don't think it goes away, because I know that when I meditate less, because I put that time in the beginning, I still seem to have that connection. Although when I go back into meditation again, it just heightens it a little bit more. So it's very much building that skill set and building that connection. So can you talk a little bit about, I know that you're booked up forever and ever for private sessions. I looked at his calendar this morning. You can't get in until after August of this year. Can you share a little bit how a group session can be just as meaningful, or definitely worth the time, as a private session?
Yeah, the hypnosis itself, the Between Lives Soul Regression, works just as well in a group as it does in a private session. And I think actually for a small subset of the population, there's an advantage to doing it in a group, which is, you know, when you do it as a private session, I prompt you to ask your council of elders a question, and then I'm silent so that you can hear the answer and then repeat the answer to me. So for a small subset of people, that silence feels a little bit like pressure, like, oh, I got to come up with an answer now. And anytime you feel any tension during the process, that's counterproductive to being in the trance state.
Yeah.
But when you do it online in a group, it isn't interactive. It can't be the way a private session can be. So I prompt you to ask your counsel a question. I'm prompting the whole group at the same time. And then there's a period of silence, but you're not going to then tell me anything that your counsel is saying. We can't do it that way. So I think that that takes the pressure off for that subset of people. It allows them to relax that extra inch, and that makes a difference, allows them to go deeper, and then they can get to their counsel.
Yeah, and boy, once you connect with that information that your guides and your counsel have, it's just extraordinary.
It can really be life-changing. I mean, when we do it as a group in the standard set of questions, you know, I go through all the major relationships in a person's life. What did you plan with your mother, father, siblings, romantic partners? Think of a challenge, either past or present, that was quite significant. Ask the council, did you plan this? And if so, why? Do that for a few more challenges. And we'll just cover all the major areas of a person's life.
Mm-hmm. And there's something about that energy that you step into, that there's so much information just in that energy field.
There's a lot of information in the field. And then, you know, people wonder, well, how am I going to remember all of this information? Well, that's why we take a long break right after the regression. And I always tell people, before you get anything to eat, spend some time journaling, write down everything that you can recall, or make a recording in which you talk about everything that you can recall. And we actually put the list of questions for the council in the chat box on Zoom, so everybody can look at all the questions and be prompted to remember what they were told in response.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. I've done a few past life regressions, not in between lives, which I would love to do one of your workshops, but it's really, it can be life-changing. I mean, the information you get is so different than the information we get here on the planet. It's just much broader, much more enriching. It's pretty spectacular. So thank you so much, Rob, for coming and joining us. It's been such a thrill for me, because I'm a fangirl of yours, obviously. How can we find out more about you?
The website is yoursoulsplan.com. When you first get there, something will pop up asking you to sign up for the newsletter. I would encourage people to do that. That'll keep you informed of everything. Go to the events page. You can see all the workshops there. Go to the sessions page. There's actually a 1-hour video of a Between Lives Soul Regression, a private session you can watch. You can see exactly what's involved in doing it. If you have any questions for me, go to the contact page. I respond to my email. A lot of good information there. My wife's channelings of the beings of light are there. We have a monthly membership program called Rise to the Path, a community of very loving spiritual people who support each other on this path. So a lot of different things to look at.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And we'll have all that information listed down below. Super easy to find. Rob, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you'll come back and see us again. And I'd love to talk with your wife as well.
I'm sure she would enjoy that. And thank you for doing this show. I think you're bringing a lot of much needed light into our world.
Thank you. It's been very, very rewarding for me. I appreciate your time today, Rob. Thank you.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one, or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.